Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Cook, and I'd like to talk to you about British Scaperboard. I carried my camera with me in my car for years and years and years, and whenever I went, I would see something to record. I would take as many as 3 or 4 of the same subject, but not from the same position. And from that camera I had slides, and it is from the slides as a record of my time, and I have over 10,000 slides. I could take any subject I wanted to. So I would make a decision of what subject to do. It is manufactured in Britain, but it is also manufactured in France. And it is porcelain china sprayed on very thin cardboard and baked. This is the white. And on the silhouette you would completely black in the sketch that you've made. And on the sketch then you would use special instruments. I use both white and black. This is an illustration of a black subject on the white Scaperboard. This is a commencement of an item on the black Scaperboard. The boards that you can purchase from SD, and SD is the manufacturer's name, SD British Scaperboards. Some are grained and some are stippled in order to let the artist or artists like myself create different appearances on the paper itself. And if you look carefully at this illustration here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types, all of different black but stippled or grained to give you different appearances. And on my left hand side here, the half tone effect. This gives you not a white but a grey medium, and it's done simply by making very thin marks. I'll illustrate here, going very short and in an opposite direction there, and that's green. You can do so many different things. We have to be very, very careful, because you cannot place your fingers or hand on the black surface. If you do, you will leave an oil imprint from your own body. So you always have a piece of paper, or you wear white cotton gloves. To use the Scaperboard, this is my little box of tricks. As long as it has a point, you can use anything you want. A nail file, or even a nail, but this is a special instrument for engraving, and you always keep it very, very sharp by every 5 or 6 strokes on the subject, on the black Scaperboard or white, you sharpen the point to keep that point very, very sharp. These are free. Go to your local dentist and ask him for his old instruments. See where they are? Very good. An X-Acto knife, another nail file, and this one is a Draftsman cutter. Again, with a very, very sharp point, so that you can do marks. Now, to make the marks, make sure that your hand is over either with your gloves or white paper. And with a firm grip, you can make either a mark. If you hold it in this fashion, you can make a wide sweeping mark, like so. But if I hold it in that position, I can make a straight line curved line, any shape I want to. This is my favorite weapon, and I call it a weapon because it is dangerous. I will show an illustration. The book. This is a sketch of a lion. This is the same lion but reduced in size, and I will work on it in a moment. Before you even, or rather after you have made a decision as to what you're going to do, I always prepare a pencil sketch of my subject, and that is the like of what I do. From there, having finished the pencil sketch, if I'm satisfied with it, then I take tracing paper, and I clamp it down with very small clamps on the side and on the bottom, and then very carefully follow the outline of your heavy pencil mark underneath of the subject that you're going to portray. Take away the original pencil sketch. At one time I used to throw them away, but now I don't. After I finish everything, I cover the pencil sketch with new ink, and therefore I have the same subject but in the two different mediums, ink subject and Scaperboard. From the tracer board, I now place it on the board. The board that you purchase here is very expensive, so you cannot afford to waste it. So what I do is I think of the subject, how large I'm going to make it, 8 by 10, 8 by 12, 14, 12 by 16, 16 by 20, or whatever. And I very carefully measure. I know the size of the board that I'm going to use, so on a sheet of paper on my artist board in front of me, I measure different sizes. Having done that, I finish up with pieces like this. For instance, out of that large sheet, I can take a 16 by 20 piece. This is what it would look like, but these are some of my scribbles. And you will note it doesn't cover the 16 by 20 completely. I always cover it 1/8 of an inch underneath the mat, so that the mat, when it is placed over the scratch board, underneath it is a subject 16 by 20, but it's added 2.5 or 3 inches in the mat at top and bottom and on both sides. That way you have a larger subject, and then it can be framed. Having done that, then you can start to work. Before you even start working, you have to know the subject very well. For instance, I like doing birds very, very much. So you must know how the feathers are affected or work for the birds, what direction they take, how large they are, and where they are placed. For instance, if you do an owl, all the hairs going from the face are going out as if around the circle. So that's what you must do. With this lion, as a fur-bearing creature, you must know the anatomy of animals. And the easiest way to do that is to go to the museum, get to know the museum director or curator, and tell him who you are, what you want to do, and ask if you may be permitted to go behind the scenes and see the stuffed animals. And there you will actually see, if they're looking at a deer, how the hairs come down over the nose in one straight line, but on the side of the nose they go in different directions. So you learn how the hairs on each creature is going, and it's done for a purpose, naturally to shed water. The same with the birds. If you do with the birds, then you must know how the feathers are made. For instance, on the head of a bird, the feathers are really very, very fine hairs. But as they come down the face, they begin to get wider and just a little bit longer. Under the neck are the smallest feathers of the bird. Each feather goes in two directions, to the left and to the right, and both ends are attached to the main spine, which fits into the skin of the creature itself. I will show you an illustration later on of the feathers. With this lion, it has a very large mane, and the mane comes down in this direction, and so with a firm grasp you place your hand on your knife and press, making the large white movements because the hairs are thicker, and so that's how we go. And they are not straight, they are curled. But before I did that, what I did was to put the short hairs underneath the large hairs. Having done the mane, then look at the head. And at the top of the head, the hairs are really just very, very small spikes. And so, on the sheet here, which I must give to you in a moment, it's a very small piece here, you grasp near the point of the instrument and very, very delicately draw short strokes. Remembering that the end of the hair is thinner than what the hair is when it enters the skin of the animal. So you always work from the widest end that's underneath and work down. In other words, you are working down on the creature. One further way is that for me, what I do is to enable me not to keep thinking of where the hair is going. With my pencil, and in front of me and on the background of the creature, I draw pencil marks in the direction, and I make an arrow of whatever direction the hair is to go. And that enables me, as I go on with the creature, to go the hairs, because the hairs change direction all the time. On the top of the head, very, very short. As I get down to the nose, they're really pinpricks. Very, very fine. Same as us. Then on the mane. And on the body itself of the lion, each stroke, because the hairs on the lion are very, very short. Very short indeed. It's really to shed a little rain that they get. Whereas if you do a deer, that is vastly different, because they have long hairs on their body except on the immediate back and underneath on the belly. That is one way of doing it. Let me explain to you about the feathers. Feathers, I find them very interesting, especially in the different birds, because all birds, they have a different area in which to live. They all have a different song, different tweet, different twat, different noise. They are built a little different. Some has cleaves, very sharp claws, but the feathers are all the same. And first of all, we start at the beginning with a very straight, mark, because the feather itself is straight. And actually there's two, because where the feather starts is actually a tube, but it gets narrower and narrower and narrower until right at the end, that's all you can see is one line. Now as you look at the feather, on the left hand side, all the strokes go to the left from the center. So, like this. Then you have to turn your work and you go to the right. And as you go from the end, or the top where the feather starts, all the feather markings actually get shorter and shorter until they meet right at the peak of the feather. And that is how a feather is made. I'll continue doing the work a little more, because on the other side, on both sides, the feathers again meet. And this time the feather on the left hand side of the original, the marks come back towards you. And as they go to the peak of the feather, what happens? There's a shadow, because there's a gap between feather 1 and feather 2. And so as you go along, and you start from the bottom working back towards the body. Why? Because all the feathers are overlapping. The feather, this one here, you don't do the complete feather, it's about 3/4 of its length. And the next feather comes down to meet it just like that. So another feather 1, I've now got the feather 2 above it, and same marks going to the left, marks going to the right. And the further you go up towards the neck of the creature, the feathers become smaller and smaller and smaller, and they all meet underneath. There. Then you can work on them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. By the time you finish a bird, let's take the eagle. You've crisscrossed and marked on there thousands of times. Thousands. If you want to complete a good subject, you must be very, very patient. What I do is I work for a couple of hours on one subject, then I put it to one side. And I'll go and perhaps I'll see what will I do next, or what would I like to do next. And I pick a different subject completely. I'll do a barn or a classical car. So I put that away, I put my tools away, and I pick up my pencils and I work on here for a while. This aids me a great deal with my eyes, because with the fine work done here and so meticulously done, it's a strain. So don't work on it too long. Take your time. Don't get tired. Stop working on a subject like that and go to something else before it's too late. And that's what you have to do. I will show you some finished subjects. Let's deal going back to the white, where I've drawn a silhouette. Now if you look very carefully at this, I've done the complete black silhouette. Then, with my favourite knife, take it out, but I choose this time to take an X-Acto knife, a very, very fine point. And I can make buttonholes for the cowboy's jacket. I can put the shape on he's wearing a shirt, and he's wearing a shirt with lines on it. I can outline his hat, come down the saddle, down the leg, there's your chapelle, they call it chaps, I think they call them, on the leg. And then the mane of the animal, at the moment it's just a black mess, But with this knife, very carefully draw inside the black subject and draw lines on every one. Not straight lines, make them curved. If you look very carefully, you'll find curved. Having done the mane, then you do the feet, or the foot, because you can't see it there. We can only see one foot of the cowboy. And you work on his stirrups and the leather work, his trousers, then the nostrils of the horse underneath, remembering that at the moment it is solid black, so you draw like a shape of a U upside down so that the curve is at the top. And that's all you need to do. And you've created the mouth. For the eye of the creature, you don't see very much because he's bucking and he's closed his eyelid, so you can only just see a few hairs. Mark a few hairs, done. You cannot see anything because his left foreleg, because it's the other side of the animal and it's completely in shadow, so you leave it alone. Coming back down onto the flank of the animal, mark where the muscle is. Now this is where I mentioned you go and you seek advice to learn about the anatomy of the creature that you're going to do. The horse has very powerful haunch muscles in its legs, rear legs, and so you create that by drawing the line from just underneath the saddle down the outside of the leg all the way down, and then just below where the belly goes underneath, make a mark, because here is the major muscle on the leg, and you can curve it, and that's what you do. Very little on a hoof, just a few scratches. But on the left leg, on the other side of the creature, it catches some light coming down. And this is what I do very often. When I am making a subject, no matter what, I always take a pencil. This isn't a pencil, but this is what I do. And if I have my cardboard in front of me, I make marks with an arrow telling me where the light is coming from. Then I don't have to bother. And if you look here, this is what I've done in other subjects. I've always been fascinated with the spiders in their web, not so much with the spider, but the web and how it's made and why he makes it, etc. One day, I decided to go into the forest with my wife, and I also took with me a can, an instant can of spray paint, white. And I found just what I wanted to find, and it was a very large web. I stood back about 2.5, 3 feet, and I destroyed the web of the spider, unfortunately, by doing it later because he couldn't use it. And I sprayed the complete web, and it stood out just as I wanted to. Absolute white. Each string is white. And if you look carefully at this finished item that I've done in front of you, you can see all the webs, how it's made, and how each one is joined to the outlets, going right to the center of the web. And in the center, I have drawn the spider itself. I was delighted when it was finished, and I showed it to some school children, and I got a wonderful reception back from the school children that day that I showed them. They were so amazed when I told them the story about it. That is easily done. I have mentioned knowing the anatomy of a creature. In this instance, I am showing you the head of a finished barn owl. And a barn owl's head is like a big saucer, indented, and in the dead center of it, the beak, on each side of the beak, 2 amazing eyes. And if you look very carefully, what I've done is to draw an orbit, and in the orbit made a specific dot of white, because if you look at a person when there's a light around, you will find a point of light in the pupil of the eye, and that's just how it shows in an owl. Having done that, we've got 2 complete circles. Then you'll put some dots about 1.5, almost 2 inches at the top, and you draw lines, and then this illustration. And again, repeat, I said, beginning at the sun and work out. You always work out. Don't work in, because the end of the hair on the owl's face, as with animals, is always thinner at the end that is furthest from the body. As you're working around the circle of the eye, and that's how we can finish it. Very easily done. Not complete within. Parts of it is much whiter, so now we go back with the same instrument, press a little harder to reveal more white. You have the eye here. You scratch your own circle for there, and on the edge of the pupil is the line of white. No marks, but not a complete circle, because the pupil, as with the eye, is kind of bent. It's not always a complete circle. It's sometimes oval, depends on how the creature is looking at you. Now, to do this, I've suggested to you that you get to know the curator or the director of the museum. Tell him who you are, what you want to do, and ask if you can go at the back of the museum to look at the stuffed owls. And you can make sketches of them. You can even take slides or photographs of them and work from them, such as that. And that is how you finish up with the subject, just the head of an owl. Frame it. Now, this owl's head is done from a piece of the very large 19 by 22 inch drawing or board bought from SD Manufacturing Company. This is another illustration. Now here, this illustration that you see before you is of a doe deer. If you look very carefully, these are very short at the bottom, very short outlines, and over the top some heavier scratches, denoting some, because there's always a harder hair underneath. There are actually sometimes 2 and 3 layers of hairs on a creature. Remember that I told you, never ever place your hand on the board like that. Always have white paper or white gloves on your hands so that you can work. Here is a good illustration, as I told you, of how the muscles of the head, because when he tweaks his eyes, then the muscles here move, creating indentations apparently in the feather, in the hairs. So we can see the marks there leading down. This is a highlight under his chin. There's always a highlight underneath because he's continually grousing and rubbing against the bottom of the earth and the scratches, so that remains white. The nostrils, the dark inside part of the nostril, there and here, and this is the outline here, the outline there on the top of the lip, leaving the shadow because the top lip is curved, as with the bottom lip also, and they are curved inwards, creating a shadow. And that's how the shadow is made here. I mentioned about going to a museum. This is an illustration here. This bird is actually in the museum in Edmonton, Alberta, and hanging from the ceiling by 2 wires, which, when they put on view in front of people you don't see because the background is black and the wires are so fine. And I made a sketch of it, and you can see here the feathers going up here, and then this feather just here disappearing because the one above it takes over. And that's how we form them up. The edge of the wing is always appears to be white. I don't know why, but it is the outline. And then from the outline you look very, very carefully how short but stark these lines are. Then they kind of disappear because they're going into the shape of feathers. Now this creature here is a light feather. Going to its tail feather, remember I told you, one side of the feather goes to the left and the other goes to the right. And you can see here, this feather here is not a full feather because part of it is hidden by the feather above it. So you create it by leaving the black entirely alone. Leave it alone. You continue up here with the highlight until you meet the second wing, the upper wing. And the upper wing is still exactly the same as the lower wing. You can shade here. You can see a better illustration of the marks that I told you about on the feather. Going to the right, going to the left. And here, the tube, which is really the center of the feather, is not exhibited at all, but I've left it entirely black because there is a shadow there. And you can learn all that by simply going and talking to the director, and they will give you all the assistance, especially if you ask correctly. This is a different illustration. This is a red fox. Underneath on the red fox is kind of a yellow. Yellow, not skin, but the hairs. And so instead of creating yellows, I've simply scratched all of the black off, leaving it white. Then, with an Indian ink pen with a very, very sharp point like this, I have put occasionally India ink marks here and there. You cannot see the rear leg, which is bent underneath the creature. So, to create a void, I've left it entirely alone, making very, very short marks up to a certain distance. Remembering, as I told you, wherever or whatever creature I did, I know how the hair is going, and I make marks on my easel in front of me, telling me what to do. And frequently, if it's a sunny day, if I'm doing a bird or like with the spiders, I will put up here a circle and then the word sun in the middle of it. Just that, it's easy to do that. The tail, end of the tail, scrape entirely clean. Taking again the movement from inside out, and here out, and here up and out. Again, leaving a black mark underneath because there's a shadow there. You can't see it. You can see the shadow. You cannot see the hairs, so you leave it alone. You can draw the outline of the haunch of the creature with a very sharp outline and take it all the way through. At the top of the spine of the animal, all these marks here are very, very short. And to do it, you turn your work at an angle, and with the white paper underneath the wrist, work quietly from the head to the tail. As you get over the spine towards the flank, then the hide hairs become a little longer and whiter, so you can mark them in. Do your short marks first, longer white strokes afterward to create longer hairs. Go. The tail, remember I said leave a shadow because the tail doesn't continue. It does continue off the haunch, but because it's underneath, then there is a shadow there, so you leave it alone. Do all the short hairs first, then go back, and again with the short instrument, very sharp, draw some longer hairs, because they're not all long hairs. There are layers. And you work away from the creature, moving up your paper. Right to the tail, at the end of the tail, which in the case of the red fox, the hairs appear to be white, but in effect it's just a lighter colour. And that's how we finish an instrument. Here, coming down to the head are all very short strokes indeed. Remember how the hairs turn in different direction. On the nose, they're going from the forehead to the end of the nose, and they're shorter and shorter as they get to the end of the nose. On the side of the face, as with your face, if you grow a beard like I do, then the hairs go in different directions because they go around the cheekbones, creating depth. You can draw the eye there. Now frequently, to make sure that I have a round object, I will go to my mechanics box of tools. All trades have different tools, but an artist can use any tool you want, and I use a lot belonging to other people. If I want a circle, then I will take a tool from mechanics, from dentists, anyone which is round, and I will use it, even to using coins. In this instance, to create a round circle for his eyes, because it must be round, I take a drill, place it over the top where I want to go, and lightly turn it. And I have a circle, a dead circle, and now I can work on it. The under part of the eye will always show light, always. Here, so, very gently, take the black off. You cannot see over the top of the eye, because again, it's round. The eye is not flat in anyone. It is circle. And so you have to show that by a shadow. In this case, I've shown it on the left-hand side. The hairs, as you can see, are going in a different direction. And what I've done is that on my paperwork in front of me, or perhaps what I'm even underneath my hand, I have the direction and arrows pointing where they must go. Because as I go along, here they go in this direction, but just above it, at 2 inches above it, they go in a different direction. It's the same animal, but same hairs, but they go in different directions. And that is the beauty of going to a museum and seeing the stuffed creatures. It helps you a great deal. You can make many mistakes in scratching in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you can't afford to do it with British Scaperboard because it is expensive to buy. Very, very often you cannot rectify the mistakes. However, there are times when you can. You can take black India ink, and if it isn't too deep, then you apply India ink over the mark. But as I mentioned before, don't go near that place where you've put India ink for perhaps a couple of days, because the porcelain china, the white stuff, gets very soft and it will crumble. Don't do it. Having finished, especially with birds, having finished the creature, I'll pick up this bird here. There are special inks that you can buy in most artist shops, of special inks that can be applied to special papers. They are fairly expensive, very, very small bottles, and you can apply the colour to any creature that you want.